to definitely the normal Wednesday club. We're used to it. I'm Amy Dallin. Who wants to be Taliesin?
Oh, I'm Taliesin Jaffe.
And I am Matthew Key. I really like Doctor Strange.
So convincing.
I'm an executive goth, not a regular goth.
No. You're definitely a goth who gets to use the special bathroom.
Yeah.
Xander, and Danielle Radford are my guests.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for having us. I'm so excited.
So you have been with us before. You were here to talk Comics Code.
Yes.
And Xander, we have not had the pleasure of having you on the show.
'Cause-
Although your face might be familiar to some of our
That's
audience.
true. You might have seen me on We're Alive Frontier, Shield of Tomorrow, Sagas of Sundry Madness, or Good Fortnight Kevin.
Yay, congratulations!
Thank you. That just premiered last night, the first episode. So check out every fortnight, which is every 2 weeks. We'll be releasing a new episode, and they're just going to get wackier and weirder. So I can promise that.
So I don't think we've trained you yet, but when someone says library bards,
Hey. Yeah, that was perfect. That was it. You nailed it. Oh yeah, I'm also a part of the Library Bards. Hey.
there isn't usually a middle, but now I'm gonna.
No, there's a
I'm
middle.
sorry, we're gonna have to jump in between you two.
Just
Danielle,
pick a
where might
color and
people
get some
know
leather.
your face from?
Y'all would probably know me from Screen Junkies on Thursdays, where I do SJU and I do movie fights. Some of you who like the wrestling might know me from my wrestling podcast, Tights and Fights. You may know
Yay.
me from some of my former work with Hyper RPG. And you might just know me from my Twitter, where I tweet things. Oh, and Allison Rosen is your new best friend is a thing that I've been doing a lot of, trying to insert some geekness anywhere I can. Allison is great.
I don't know Allison Rosen is your new best friend.
So that is Allison Rosen is like a podcast. Allison Rosen is your new best friend. It's a podcast that's been around forever. She is very, very cool. She used to work with a lot of people in different radio shows, and now she has her own podcast, and it's very, very cute, and her dog is amazing. And so I've been doing those, and people kind of recognize me from them because she does a Thursday show, which is these are all of my friends, and so we just hang out and be friendly, and I get to again just insert that nerdness into the mainstream.
Yes.
Yeah,
By
get
any
'em.
means necessary.
Love it.
I'm like a koi fish.
But of nerdiness.
Yeah.
Or I'm a California roll of nerdiness, where it's I'll trick you. Next thing you know, you're eating raw tuna.
You're a gateway drug of nerdiness.
Yes.
I love it. Oh, this is our mission. It's
Yep.
so extremely on
Pretty
mission
soon you're
for
eating
us.
sashimi, and then you're just like, how did this happen?
Oh, it's so good. What is this octopus? Working on it.
So tonight's topic, we are going to talk about something actually a lot of y'all have requested over time, which is the wonderful world of licensed comics. That is to say, original stories told in comics based on universes that come from elsewhere, which is a fabulously wide net, but you each had some very exciting picks. Before we get into our exact picks, I did want to talk a little bit. We did a little bit last time, but how did you get started reading comics? This is my favorite guest question.
Oh, please.
I'll go first?
Yeah,
okay.
please.
So I have talked to you about this before, that comics, American comics, is kind of like a hole in my nerdiness where I need filling.
We'll get you down.
Yeah. But since my childhood, I have since gotten into them in a way. I loved seeing the animation, though. So my knowledge, especially when it comes to DC, comes from the Justice League and Unlimited and the animated series. But I did read a lot of manga growing up. And so I haven't told this story before, but in my small town of Freedom, Wisconsin, there was a local...
Called Freedom?
Freedom. I went to Freedom High School.
Wow.
And I worked at Freedom Foods. But there was a local bookstore that was just like a mom and pop small town bookstore, and I forced them to carry manga so that I could get that's how I got it. And so it's I started the anime club at my school, and I was like, we need this for school.
Activism starts at home.
It's so good. It's so beautiful.
Yeah. But I think it was just because I'm a speed reader, and so I felt that when I was younger that comic books were like a gyp for my money. When I could get a full novel and be entertained for days, I would speed through a comic book like nothing.
A ripoff.
Yeah. But I've since learned, from reading Watchmen or Saga or things like that, that where I'm like invested and I get the full volumes and I'm like, okay, it's not a chapter at a time. Like, here we go. And I'm in it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Danielle, for anyone who might not have been here last time.
So the way that I got into comic books was I have always been very much into any kind of person with a past or a person who has like an alternate ID. So like I would say that the Gem and the Hologram cartoon when I was a kid was my first entry really into this idea of like, you know, the superhero who has the business person alter ego.
Yeah.
And so that was a huge one for me, which I didn't recognize at the time as comics, but luckily comics has kind of caught up and been like, yeah, Gem's a superhero.
Is there a Gem? I mean, now there is, but was there at the time?
No, not at the time, but there were really good dolls. They were amazing, and they had the earrings, and you would press them, and they were super expensive. And
Wait, what would the earrings do when you press them?
They would light up.
Ah.
Bing, 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 bling, bling.
So good.
Gem comes around your corner, bling, bling. So, so that was, for me, I still consider that to be really my first exposure to this idea of like, oh, you know, the superhero alter ego was really cool. Then I loved the old Batman and Robin because they used to play those on a loop on the army bases I lived on. I loved, obviously, like the Tim Burton Batman and Robin, or the Batman's, the Batman Returns is still one of my favorites.
I was going to say Batman and Robin, the Schumacher one, that's still one of my favorites. It's like a sexual awakening. Like Robin.
Oh, that's adorable.
Chris
O'Donnell.
Chris O'Donnell. And I didn't know, but at the time I was like, why do I like looking at this?
I get it.
That's good. That's so cute.
Plus, there's no heterosexual reason for nipples on a bat suit. Just saying.
Just not. They didn't, you know, I don't think they put one on Babs Gordon's.
No.
Or Babs, not Gordon in this one. Anyway, so yeah, and then the X-Men cartoon came, and I was finally like, because I'd already been reading like Archie and all of these other comics, and there was that one, what was it? She was part of the Archie universe, because I used to read Garfield and Archie and all of those, and she was a model.
Katie Keene?
Yeah, Katie Keene.
Wow.
And none of it was funny or interesting. It was just about how rich she was.
I read so many books, and I have like no memory of any story that ever happened to Katie Keene.
No, her sister was cool, but she really sucked. And they were so, and I loved them as a kid. I was just, I guess it was my Kardashians, where it was just like, oh, she's just so rich, and she's got all these men who want her, but she don't want them. She's doing her own thing.
I think you just came up with the thing that they need to do to update Katie Keene. Is to just
Make a Kardashian
bring that back
style.
and make it like Katie and the Keens, and it's just the whole family of like. I think you just
That's
well,
great.
Archie, are you listening?
That's great.
From your lips to the CW.
Hey,
here.
Yeah, go straight to Riverdale.
Yeah, go straight to River. No, you're right, because her sister was really interesting, and especially, okay, I'm going to say this as though she was really interesting. The most interesting thing she ever did was there was a comic where she was talking to her friend, talking gossip, and in every frame she had a different pose. And that was fascinating to me because she was on the phone.
Like she was just voguing?
Not voguing, but where she would be like,
Casually.
oh, and in one of them, I can't do it here because I'm mic'd in a way where I can't actually do it, or I would. I don't dress be damned. Where she literally was on the bed with her legs in the air, crossed on the wall.
Oh, I've done
And
that.
like her hair down. It's like a very 60s.
Yeah. It feels good.
You and Sandra D.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Exactly. It was very Sandy. And so her sister would do, and that was one where I was like, I just really relate. How, Sway? There's no way I related. But then, yeah, the X-Men came, and I was like, I don't even care. I'm going to read a comic book. And so I bought a couple, and my mom, the best person in the world, saw that I started reading comics, and so she went to our army base. She didn't know anything. We didn't, the internet was like happening, but not to moms. So she went, no direct market. She went to like the closest newsstand she could find, bought me every comic book, and then she bought me a 12-month subscription to Wizard.
Oh, wow.
Only because they had Wolverine on the cover. So I know we all
Sure.
make fun of how often Wizard had Wolverine on the covers, but it worked for
works.
Mom.
Yeah,
There was a reason.
Yeah,
There was a
exactly.
reason it worked. My mom went like, that's that dude with the claws. And so she bought me, and then she just kept renewing it. And yeah.
For anyone in our audience who might be from a slightly different internet or comic book cohort, Wizard Magazine was a formative influence for a ton of us. It went from the 90s to like circa 2011, I want to say.
Right.
And was just a monthly print magazine, which it was easy to sort of dunk on because it would be like the 10 hottest artists, and it'd be like the exact 10 most predictable. But they also like went to bat for like, that's the first place I heard about Bone, about Jeff Smith,
Yes,
because there'd always be
absolutely.
like an indie corner, and there'd be a small section of Price Guide. There would also be a horrifying fan art gallery of people sending in their homemade
smut.
photoshops.
Yeah.
But
Your mileage may vary.
But it was also like the first place I heard about the Comic Book Defense League, because I believe it was my first issue, which if my mom knew, she would have been like, I don't care if that dude with the claws is on there, we ain't reading it.
Yeah.
There was one, and I forget the name of the man that they were covering, but he did the most kind of horrific, terrible comics. And the
Comic Book Legal Defense Fund.
yeah, they were saying, hey, these are awful, but he was being sued for them in different places, and it's like, well, you can't, and freedom of speech, and yada yada yada. And even then, Wizard was like, oh, we do not endorse this. This is hot trash. but we will say that and so it was amazing. I learned a lot, and there was also a lot of stuff about taking care of these older statesmen comic book writers, which was something that Wizard really went to bat for. And also, I mean, Twisted Toy Fair Theater.
I don't know what that is. Oh.
What's Twisted Toy Fair Theater?
So Toy Fair was something that, and
It
there
was a
used
corresponding
to be,
magazine, right?
Yeah, it used to be, there was a section where they would do grades for, this was back during the speculator era where everything was like, well, what's it worth? And now it's like, well, nothing.
Yeah.
But all of our parents thought every comic book they ever bought us was going to be worth $1 million.
Yeah.
And so in the back of Wizard, it would have a bunch of grades for comics and then a bunch of grades for toys. And they would also have
I
these.
did not read that section.
Yeah.
No one did. And then they would have
manufacturers did.
these like one panel comics on each of the toy ones, which were these Migos they would do that were really funny with Migo Spider-Man, but he was out of character.
Before there was Robot Chicken,
Right.
there were these.
No,
it's
and
like-
that's literally
I think
where
I've
Robot
seen
Chicken
this.
came from.
Yeah,
Wait, is
yeah,
that
yeah.
true?
Yes. Seth Green loved Twisted Toy Fair Theater. He, in fact, so when Toy Fair became its own magazine, when toys and chase figures and all of the stuff I haven't had to learn about since I used to sell them for a living, chase figures were like, oh, you'd get a box and there would be like one of like a special kind of the box and everyone would try to get it and they would fight and it would be stupid.
It's still a thing, but nowadays it's sort of like there's 48 different figures, and like it's not as bad as it used to be, but there was definitely a time where it was like, and that's the only girl.
Oh, right.
Yeah, yeah.
Or 47 dudes
What's
and the
interesting
chase
about
figure.
her? She's the girl.
Yeah. And sometimes it would be like there'd be two of the girls, so it would be like, it's the Muppets. And then the chase figure is Janice. Or you could get Silver Janice or whatever.
Yeah.
And so during that time, that was when Toy Fair obviously got really big, and they started expanding that section where it would be these comics, and they got to be so big where, again, it was Spider-Man, but he was like a very selfish, out of character Spider-Man. Everyone was out of character, but it was really funny. And they began to be so big that they started having, they were taking up more and more of the magazine for Twisted Toy Fair Theater, and so you could start to buy these anthologies. And you can still probably buy them online. They are really funny. I haven't read them in a minute. I'm sure some of them are very problematic.
Yeah.
As was literally everything except for anything that came out in the last 5 years. And so that's kind of where that came from. And yes, Seth Green hosted, I think they called him like the editor-in-chief of an episode of like a issue of Toy Fair, and this was before Robot Chicken. And so when he went on to do Robot Chicken, he did it with a lot of the writers of Twisted Toy Fair. Yeah, so for people who've always been like, well, he ripped them off, it's like, no, he worked with them.
He hired them.
Yeah.
Or at least consulted with them and paid them money to consult on making this other thing.
Great.
That's cool as heck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aww.
I learned something.
So speaking of origin stories, one way that a lot of people get into comics, this is me, is sort of segueing, and will recur throughout this episode, because for a lot of people, the thing that gets you into comics is either an adaptation of comics into another medium, or a comic drawn from something you already love in another medium.
Yes.
So, for instance, there was a period in time where I got super broke and stopped buying single issues. I was just like borrowing my friends' trades and all of that. And the book that got me back walking through stores was that I was like, they are doing a season 8 of Buffy.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
And my habit came back with a vengeance. And then I got the employee discount, and the rest was history.
Oh, God. And things get buck wild.
They do. But before there was a Buffy season 8, there was one very interesting that was Danielle's pick for this week, and one of my favorite comics ever. What is Frey?
Yay.
Okay, so Frey is the continuing story of the Slayers, and it's about, I want to say about 100 years after the Slayers or
It's
something.
like ambiguously 200.
Yeah, far into the future, where it's the kind of future where things like vampires and monsters, they're just considered to be a result of global warming. So vampires are called like lurks, and there are all these different names, and people are just like, oh, it's just these mutants because we messed up our planet real bad, not knowing that they're demons who had always been around and are kind of taking advantage of the situation to become more overt and out in the open.
And other mutants exist in the world too.
Yes,
like the fish guy, the boss.
Gunther?
Gunther.
I don't know what you
Gunther?
call...
I'm not sure. He is definitely like a fish.
He's like,
But it's one of those great things about it is like, and here's a fun thing about comics as medium, like you don't necessarily have to explain. You have to just do a fish man, and then you just figure it out.
And then he's just a fish dude.
Yeah.
And you don't have to hire Doug Jones. You can just draw a fish dude.
You could.
You could if you made it a thing, but you could just have a fish dude and it's like, I'm a fish. So... And so
I think I pulled the covers for the Frey Trade and for Frey Volume 1 might be in there if we want some visual aids as we do this. This, of course, it was a miniseries that ran in the middle of Buffy and was actually Joss Whedon's first comic book work.
And for those of you who are familiar with Buffy, I know you recognize that axe. Yeah. This was the first time that axe was shown because I believe...
Really?
Yes, I believe that Frey came... during the season, which everyone thinks is sad, during season 6 was when Frey came out. And so when the axe finally came during season 7, everyone was like, oh.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was the debut of like a major plot point before it actually came in.
Yeah.
Thank you. And so... I'm being loved on.
Yeah.
And so there's Frey. And so her name, I believe it's pronounced Malika. And without too many spoilers, but I feel like you can give this away, Malika Frey is one of a twin. It's her and it's her twin brother.
Right.
And her twin brother is dead due to lurks, which again at the time it's just because lurks are like mutants and no one knows what they do when they kill people. And so Malika she gets the leadership and abilities of the Slayer, but... Or sure, she gets the abilities, but she doesn't get the leadership of the Slayer. And she never winds up getting the premonitions or any of the other things that come with the visions. And so she just has like the superpowers. And she's just like, when there is a guy, not a watcher, a demon dude, who is like, hey, like, a Slayer is a thing. And he's like, you're so fast and smart and you're a born leader and you get vision. She's like, nah, dude, I'm just really flippy and good at stuff.
That's one of my favorite quotes. Is like, I just thought I was good at stuff.
Yeah, I'm just good at stuff. She's like, yeah, I'm good at stuff.
It's a really fun twist on the Chosen One thing, where she's like, so that's the package? Didn't get it.
Yeah.
Didn't get most of it.
Yep. And I think I also put in, one of the series opens really beautifully. It starts with sort of a foreboding couple of pages of like prophecy, and then this.
Yeah.
Bad day. Started bad, stayed that way.
Yep.
The opening of chapter 1, she's fallen off a building. They're in the future in Haddon, which we all assume is Manhattan.
Yeah.
I don't know if they make that explicit.
And she is a criminal.
And she's got the coolest
Obviously.
hair.
She has the coolest hair.
It was before we had all done that to our hair. This was when
yeah.
I was like, wow, that looks so cool. Probably formative.
Sure.
I mean, look, there was a whole series of comic books with people with really cool purple hair.
Yeah.
And just in the last 2 years, dye technology has
Caught up.
So we
It's
can
like
all have
the way we're inventing technology we see in Star Trek. We're inventing hair we see in comic books.
Yeah.
We're like, make it happen.
It's so true.
do it now. So she is a smuggler. Joss loves a smuggler.
Yeah.
So she's a smuggler. Her twin brother is dead, and her older sister, is a cop.
Which is just a great setup.
It's a good dynamic. Yeah.
And so and you actually wind up learning a lot, not just about her and her future, but you learn about different ways that the Slayer can work. You learn about different artifacts of the Slayer, and it's if you enjoy Buffy, it is well worth your time and worth reading. It's a really fun book. It's a quick read. The art is beautiful.
Carl Moline, I think, is the artist on that.
Yeah.
This is when eventually the book was so good that they there's like we can get into this more later. I think you were in the middle of a sentence, but I will get excited and try to lay out so Buffy's an interesting example of talking about licensed comics because it's had different phases of comics. Buffy, of course, was a television series from 1997 to 2003 or early 1998, whatever. Who remembers when Buffy started? I don't know.
It's like 97 or 98. I think
Yeah.
97. It started when I was an age.
What?
It started when I was an age.
Was
An age. Yes. Me too.
Of age? No, I definitely wasn't.
I was not of age.
We were in a crucial window for Buffy to hit and change us. It's a television show come up with by Joss Whedon, but created by him and a team of amazing people over the course of many years. Had a spin-off called Angel that went on for several years, and almost relatively quickly, once the show became the tiny breakout hit that it became, they licensed out comics. But at the time, they tried to make sure all of those comics were sort of out of continuity, where it was like lost stories that kind of fit in between things.
Sure.
What happened during summer?
Yeah.
We're all kids. A Christmas special?
Right.
Different weird things like that. Yeah.
And I feel like, and I don't know, I'm not coming from a place of knowledge, but I feel like that's what happens a lot with licensed material. They're like, well, we can't change anything in the canon, and but we can play with these characters in a one-shot environment.
Absolutely. It's sort of, until relatively recently, I would say that was probably the most common model for licensing comics.
It makes sense.
Because, if you're drawing from a book or a TV show or whatever else, you just want something that fits in with it but doesn't necessarily change it, and it was relatively rare that you had their permission to be like, here's what happens next.
Yeah.
Right, and that's why crossovers, I think, were also so common. I think that'll probably be something we talk about more later, but crossovers were very common because those are very easy to be like, oh, this is a one-off and it's really fun, and everyone knows not to take it serious.
Yeah.
It's sort of clear that this shouldn't affect the way that you read whatever the primary text is. So Buffy had those, and I've read a good number of those. They're now collected in Dark Horse's little omnibus collections. And so they had licensed it out to the company Dark Horse, which you've heard us talk about before. And they were doing sort of these smaller, stories that fit in with things but weren't official because they had permission, but they didn't have direct involvement from the people making the show, who were, of course, busy making the show.
Yeah.
But as it turns out, Joss and a lot of the people he works with, big nerds.
What?
So you don't always have, it's not always the case that the creator of something would be particularly interested in taking a direct hand in the comic book adaptation because, most of them, if you train to be a screenwriter, you like to write screenplays.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily want to do that other thing, but there's sort of the new generation of creators is much more likely, I think, to have kind of a well, I like comics. I want to make sure the comic, meets my standards. Anyway, they had these Dark Horse out of continuity, but clearly faithful to the spirit of Buffy stories. And Frey was the first one, I think, that was supposed to be take this as canon. It fits with the show, but they wanted to find a way to keep it separate enough that like they were still in the middle of making the show. I think it took like over 2 years for Frey to finish coming out. So it was probably like seasons 4 through 6 or something like that.
Knowing that now, because I came into Buffy later and read Frey later, that totally changes what that experience would be like.
Right.
You know, reading Frey and finding out this information about the Slayer before it was really delved into in the show, and then seeing like the Slayer's weapon and things like that, and yeah.
Yeah, I remember the feeling of seeing that show up in the show and be like,
Yeah. Yeah. And that must have felt like exclusive because you were one of the only ones that were really reading the comic and not just casually watching the show.
And I want to say, and don't quote me, but I want to say the last issue of Frey definitely wrapped before you see the axe in season 7.
I think that's
so.
the case.
When you go and there's like this Slayer weapon and she grabs it, you're like, like it's a thing. Like, it's definitely like it's a very visceral like.
Because I did not have that reaction. I went, that looks dumb. Sorry.
You're like, weird red axe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, why does she suddenly have a super weapon, whereas she was always fine with just like table legs before?
That's exactly my thought. And I was like, it's not even like cool. Now I think it's cool because it has like significance. But at the time I was like, ugh.
Well, and
ugly.
it's a gamble, and it's one reason that you don't get more often things crossing in between because you can't rely, like you want your audience to mostly have the same reaction to things, not a wildly separate one based on whether you already know what that thing is.
Yeah.
So, like, once Frey was completed and they finished the run of the series and sort of had time to, like, I guess all miss it, they did do the picture that you guys saw earlier of the Buffy season 8 comics.
Yes.
Where Joss assembled the crew, got Jane Espenson, got Brian K. Vaughan guesting in.
Wow.
Which is
I didn't know that.
He and Joss swapped books. He went to Runaways, or Joss went to Runaways, and Brian did an arc on Buffy.
Which, I mean, it's arguable, but I will say that Brian's arc on Buffy was better than Josh's arc on Runaways.
Oh, gosh. Well, it's funny because...
Don't at me.
Because when I first read season 8, I didn't know who Brian K. Vaughan was, but after reading Saga, now I do. So that'll change a reread if I decide to do that.
They had done in between. I grabbed random things that I counted for today, but 2 of my favorite collections were done sort of in between the out of continuity Dark Horse stuff and the like properly in continuity season 8 stuff. They did a lot of short stories.
Sure.
Because they were sort of, Frey was intentionally a mini-series because he didn't know how much he could commit to. He didn't know how much he wanted it to touch on continuity. Obviously, it worked out in the long run. But look at the people who contributed to these.
Yeah, these are very shadow of the bad. They're very like...
Oh, sure.
That is I feel like, and I've always felt like that is the idea behind these books.
Yeah. Jane Espenson does a Pride and Prejudice riff in there, which is...
Of course she does. So you've got Espenson, Sam Loeb, Drew Goddard, Ben Edlund, who was amazing.
Creator of Kick and a writer on Angel.
Cameron Stewart, Tim Sale, Ben Steinbeck, Cliff Richards, Doug Petrie, of course, David Fury, of course, Amber Benson, who was Tara, did a lot.
Really?
A lot of writing for some of and I think she did a couple after season 8, but for these anthologies, Tara.
The real person, Tara, who is our
the
friend.
real person, Tara, who I love and who died.
Very much alive.
But Amber Benson did a lot of. At first, she was doing because she had experience writing, but not as much experience doing writing for comic books or doing. So she was doing backup stories, and then she kind of built her way into doing bigger stories.
I had no idea.
She wrote in some of the novels, didn't she? Am I making that up in my head?
Yes. Lynell Francis Yu, who I think most people probably know as Francis Yu. These are Carl Moline. I'm skipping names that you will all know as well.
Yeah.
These were...
And I don't know, I assume they were financially successful for Dark Horse. They were certainly sort of a hit with the audience of us who are sort of like, these feel like,
actual episodes.
Like real lost pieces of the mythology. They fit in beautifully, they make sense, they're each different, and they're all interesting.
So beautiful.
They ended up, I think, republishing those when they started, eventually, like a couple years after the series ended, they started As opposed to the previous model of doing it, they started a different of the licensed models, which is the official continuity model, the continuation. Buffy had 7 seasons.
There's Frey in here.
Yeah.
There's a Frey, like, mini
I had totally
story.
forgotten there's an extra Frey story in
I didn't know.
there.
It's so
Yeah.
good. Sorry. I got distracted the first thing up, and I was like, wait a second. Anyway.
So yeah, Buffy, the show ran for 7 seasons, so they started a comic called Buffy Season 8, which at the time I was like, you can do that?
Yeah, right? That's so, like, out of the box.
And they did it real big. A lot of stuff happened on there, which was like...
They tried it.
They
you tried it.
Some of it worked real well.
Yeah, some of it was crazy.
They realized they had no budget, and they've talked to themselves, a lot of the writers who collaborated on this, about how, like, maybe not every idea that they tried made perfect sense for the story they were telling
We
in
can
the
blow
review.
up Los Angeles. Who needs it?
Look, I'm going to go ahead and say that Willow flies and it's dope.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm also...
Dawn gets turned into a centaur. It's pretty great.
She deserved it.
Which is really fun. And then some of the things they did with the relationships were weird and weird. And like some of
That's
them...
a little par for the course, though, too.
No, it is.
A
Because some
little.
of them were like, oh, they're extensions of, or they could be... How spoily can I get in this?
We will warn folks. Spoilers incoming for season 8 of Buffy. I will wave my hand when we're done with spoilers for season 8 of Buffy.
Okay, so at one point they kind of spoiled this idea that like some chick made out with Buffy when she was unconscious, which gross. We don't do that. We don't make out with people when they're not super conscious.
Gross
With
for
the
the
strawberry
unconscious reason.
lipstick thing. But it's like that Kiss of True Love. It's middle case. It's not like hardcore making out, right? Is
It's
it?
not hardcore making out, but it was one of
It
those
is a
things where
weird
they're
thing to
like,
spin as romantic.
don't make out with someone when they're passed out. They can't give consent. This isn't me waving my hand. And so they're kind of teasing that her and Willow might have a thing, but it winds up being like another hot chick,
Yeah.
which is fine, but it's also weird. And then the super weird thing, where Dawn.
Willow and the Snake? Oh! No.
No, Willow and the Snake is.
Poor
Magic.
Kennedy.
Willow and Xander. Or not Willow and Xander.
Dawn
Dawn
and Xander.
and Xander become a romantic couple. And if you've been
Better
paying
than Dawn
attention,
wanting to marry Spike.
Yeah.
Dawn season 8 would have still been 17?
She's in college.
I don't know how. They did something. It was not. They tried to like mush her age as
Yeah,
though we
like
didn't
fudge it.
remember that she was a child, but she's super a child.
I mean, spoilers for season 5. She's really only like 4 at this point.
That's fair.
that's fair.
Kind of a
true story.
vision situation.
Xander has
It
an
is a little bit of a vision suit, but it's definitely like, look, Born Sexy Yesterday only works if she's not in high school.
Oh no.
Oh.
Because she was in, look, if Lilu Dallas Multipass was also taking AP English, we would have had a different opinion about her relationship with Corbin Dallas.
Yeah.
So this is an interesting one because I ultimately liked Dawn and Xander as a pair, partly because like I'm team. I love that Xander appreciates Buffy and am only happy when he understands that it is the appreciation of a good friend.
Right.
So him finding love with people who aren't Buffy is always a thing I am down for.
Yeah.
Even with Cordelia? Or was
I mean,
that...
that was just.
I didn't like that at all. I don't like Cordelia as a character, and I didn't watch Angel, for like full disclosure. Because I was like, I didn't like Angel, I didn't like Cordelia. Why would I watch a show where they're the main characters?
If
Oh, I'm
don't
so
like
excited for you to someday watch that show.
Okay.
If nothing else, skippity doo-dah to season 5.
Okay.
And then
Does
you'll...
it work without the others?
It does.
Oh.
Because it jumps right off, and it's meant to, because it jumps right off of season 7 of Buffy. So even if you don't know a whole
okay.
lot, it is meant to be, which is kind of why it was such a bummer that it got canceled at this point. It is meant to be a season where you jump on. And so you'll see a lot of people that you love, and then that love will trickle down, and you'll be like, but I want to learn about these other people that I learned to love.
Okay. All right.
But
I'll
trust
give it
me
a
on
shot.
this.
I'll give it a shot.
I'm very
Watch
curious.
season 5.
Okay.
Like-
I'll start with season 5. That'll help, I think.
I really
Or
think
maybe
it
No,
is.
no, no,
I
I'm
did
so
try it.
torn.
I tried like episodes 1 and 2, and I was just like, I can't.
No.
Well,
You
there's a
season
lot
5.
of rough ones
Yeah.
in the first couple seasons.
Sure.
And
I mean, in Buffy too. Yeah.
But like, Oh,
Try it again. Season 5 is deliberately made for people who miss Buffy to watch something that's just like Buffy.
but it's so rewarding of like 4 years of Wesley's development.
But what's great?
Who has an arc like that?
But what's great is that you watch it and then you go back and you watch it again and you go, oh. But you have to find the thing that makes you want to earn it.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Like you have to want to watch the development.
We can wave our arms because we stopped spoiling Buffy season 8. Now we're just talking about whether Angel, like, I'm worried you might be right.
So, to catch everyone else who skipped because they didn't want to listen to Buffy season 8 comic book spoilers, I am desperately trying to convince that if you were uninterested in Angel for any reason, it is okay if you watched all of Buffy to jump from the end of Buffy season 7 directly. I mean, and you do have to rewatch Buffy season 7.
Okay.
And
Can
then
do.
But you're on Geek and Sundry and you love Felicia, so you should be doing that anyway.
Yeah.
do it. And then jump directly into Angel season 5 because that's what it's meant for. It's if you rewatch it this way.
Wow.
I know.
Chad is just shouting smile time, which is correct. But without 4 years
Chad.
of lead up.
No, but here's the thing. I have found, like, you'll watch it and it'll be like, oh, this is really good. But then all of those characters and stuff that you didn't think you were going to like, you'll go back and watch the other episodes and be like, but I know I'm going to like you. And I want to know how you get to the
But won't it
point
just
where
make
I
you, be like,
No.
get to the good version of you instead of being like, I'm on this ride and I can't believe how cool you're getting?
It was a little bit like that with DS9 before Worf showed up, or even Voyager before 7 of 9 showed up, because I was like, I know this is coming and I know it's going to get better as soon as this character comes in. I'm waiting for this character. And I liked all of it, but yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
But you probably
This is
wouldn't
now the Buffy
watched
show.
it.
Sorry,
Yeah.
folks.
If you did, yeah, I mean, you got me. You got us on a couch. It's gonna be the Buffy show.
Yeah.
The Buffy show. The Buffy show. That's the way we became the Buffy.
Copyright.
Yeah. Ugh.
We're good. We're good.
We're good. I did less than 15 seconds.
Yeah. But we were on a timeline.
Yeah. Buffy season 8.
Season 8 came out.
And interestingly, this is just I guess we're using Buffy as our test case for all of licensed comics.
Sure.
The good and the bad and the changing and the different ways of approaching it. Because during this time, because this is how companies tend to work, and because Angel was a separate thing, Angel had been licensed out to a different company.
Oh.
There are Angel comics that were from IDW.
Oh, okay.
That ran from, I don't know exactly when they started, but they were still going when Buffy season 8 started up.
Oh, okay.
When Dark Horse made that switch from the out-of-continuity stuff to sort of in-continuity stuff. And it's very interesting because the end of the Angel comics at IDW, when they eventually, because they had done an official, a season 6 Angel thing that picked up where that left off. So I guess technically, unless I have my timelines way off, that may have preceded the idea of Buffy season 8. Did not check the years on this. So one or the other of those leads me to that concept, but I don't know which.
Let us know in the chat. We'll check.
Please. Yeah. So Angel is great. Watch all 5 seasons. I'll tell you now. But she might be right to start with 5 if you can't get into it. I don't know. It's
And then go back. Trust me, you will fall in love with him because you know you'll fall in love with him.
The premise of 5 is so out there if you've been watching the show, and it's like if you already know that's where you're going, does it?
It's meant for that. It's meant for us to have a smooth. Which is why it was a bummer that it got canceled because it was meant for it to
We're
be.
back on it. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I know it was meant to be a beautiful pillow for us to land on when we were so sad about the ending of the surprise to everyone, but Sarah Michelle Gellar apparently ending of Buffy.
Right.
That's not shade. You're allowed to make decisions, but it was meant to be like a hey, I know you love this thing, but. Snuggles.
So I wonder then if, because they're it's technically one property, but it's licensed to 2 companies, do they have to check with each other about what's going on continuity-wise?
So at that point, they were dealing with things separately.
Sure.
And essentially, they were running concurrently for much of it because during the first, you get well into the Buffy comics before Angel shows up because he is under contract to IDW, and Dark Horse can't make comics with him. So it it is an interesting thing because you watch that change, and like a lot of good work happened in both places. There is, like I've always found it very funny, the IDW comics, and this is, you haven't seen the end of Angel, but I don't think this is a spoiler.
It's okay.
But there is the IDW Angel run ends with the line, "Me, I kind of want to slay the dark horse."
Oh,
They full on called it out.
wow.
Wow.
Which, unless I've made that up in my memory, like I'm pretty sure it was just kind of a cute, like, okay. I mean,
Sure.
you're already canceled.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, might as
What
well.
have you got to lose at this point?
Like an employee that's fired and goes on Twitter anyway as the company. It's like, well, I'm leaving anyway.
Yeah.
So.
Send tweet.
Yeah.
Like,
Wow, shade. Wow, shade.
Shade.
So, but the rights then went to Dark Horse, who eventually spun off like a really well-regarded Angel and Faith comic.
Oh, okay.
So that for a while was running sort of concurrently with Buffy. It's an interesting thing because now we are at a point where next month, in a couple weeks, the last Dark Horse Buffy issue is coming out. They are on season 12.
Right.
Season 12, and you know, they've spent like 12 years doing 8, 9, 10, 11, 5 seasons.
Right.
Good comic book time.
Yeah.
But they're wrapping up right now because once again the rights are moving.
Right.
And we're not exactly sure what to do with that because it only came out in an interview like 2 weeks ago.
With the reboot stuff, or with
we
the
don't know
comic stuff?
if it's the reboot, if it's the Fox Disney merger, or if it is like a third different thing. I know,
Maybe.
for instance, we had already heard. Sorry, there was so much. The Serenity comics, which are some of the best licensed comics, they were all at Dark Horse, and they wrapped up some. You know, they weren't as consistently running as Buffy, so it wasn't like they got super canceled. But after a period of inactivity, they recently announced that Boom is doing Firefly comics, which are very exciting.
Yes.
Boom.
But
I
Boom
love
has a
Boom.
deal with Fox.
Oh.
So I thought maybe that's what happened, is that like, I don't know what the nature of their deal is. I know there's some just like professional association there. Like Fox keeps optioning their stuff.
Oh my God. I didn't realize. I'm so sorry. My brain is working because Boom has been doing WWE comics.
Yeah.
And for people who know anything about what's going on with WWE, they just signed a deal where SmackDown in a year or 2 years is going to be moving from USA to Fox on Fridays. And Fox, it was a major, like a lot of zeros. So many zeros. Oh, that's so interesting to me because
Yeah.
Boom has actually been putting up some of the best WWE comics I've ever read.
Which fit right into our thing, licensed
does.
comics.
Yeah.
So people are loving these. Can
Yeah.
you briefly talk about that, and then we'll make a Boom transition before
Yeah.
we spend the rest of our lives on but anyway, bless Dark Horse for your many, many years of great work, and you will have much more good stuff to tell stories about. I'm sorry that the Buffy stuff is coming to an end, but you should be very proud of the many-year
It was
run.
a great run. Boom Comics, working with WWE, so previously before this, and I love them, they have tried so many different ways to do comics with WWE, and it's all been these so I'm going to get a little technical. I'm going to try to keep it, because wrestling is a lot of carny talk. I'm going to try
Sure. You want to break the kayfabe.
It just is.
You want to be the heel.
I know these words, some of them.
I love you so much. So
I love Glow. That's the problem.
No,
It's the Glow comic.
that is,
Yeah.
you know what? That is the thing that I love the most about Glow is that now I can actually use words like kayfabe and heel and face, and people know what I'm talking about.
yeah.
Because it is a weird carny language, but now people are starting to learn it. And so there have been great, like some good, some bad. There was one where it was like, it's all kayfabe, but it's changed. A lot of people have tried
For
to
our
do
audience,
this.
what's kayfabe? I'm sorry.
Kayfabe is the idea that wrestling is real.
Okay.
And so
Why is it called kayfabe?
the
know.
fiction, it's just a wrestling, it's just a carny term from probably the 1800s.
It doesn't make it less interesting.
Yeah,
It doesn't make me less interested in knowing why it's called kayfabe.
Well,
I
'cause
wonder
it's
if Chad will probably tell us.
Yeah, it's a word that because if you're not in the know, you wouldn't know what that means.
Oh,
And so
intentionally,
it's intentionally
unfigureoutable.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so the idea is that, well, we know this is fake, but we have to keep kayfabe.
Which in my head, it's like
the
breaking the
illusion.
masquerade.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be
Fourth
like
wall.
if Henry Cavill just walked around all day and was like, well, I'm Superman. I'm like Superman. I do super things. No, you can't watch them right now.
Yeah.
Oh, now I'm Clark Kent and I'm on this plane. That's what kayfabe is. They're actors who are
Henry
playing a
Cavill, please
role.
do that.
Yeah.
Oh my God. They're actors who are playing a role, and it used to be very, very strict with kayfabe. Like, you couldn't ride, like, people who were good guys couldn't ride in cars with bad guys, even though a lot of them were best friends who hung out all the time. Like, things like that. And now it's kind of,
Performance art.
yes, and now it's loosened, and there are all of these different things. And so a lot of comics would do this thing where it would be like kayfabe, where it'd be like, well, of course, the Ultimate Warrior is this, and he's going to do that. Or they would kind of switch kayfabe because they had someone, they've had wrestlers try to write comic books before, and those did not work. The
I
Boom
probably could have
comics-
told you that before.
Although now there's a couple who've actually done it.
really?
Well-
CM Punk wrote some Marvel stuff, didn't he? He's
Yes,
a wrestler, right?
yes, but those, yes, but those were.
So that
but
whole
he's
thought
also,
pattern.
he also loved comics before this, and he is a good writer, and he's one of like the better on the mic. Mick Foley wrote a whole thing that was like, well, what if WWE was its own city, and some of them were mayors and some of them were cops? And it's like, no, they hit other people too often to be cops. I don't want to read about. Never mind.
Oh God! Oh wow! Too real.
Too real.
Yeah.
But so now what Boom is doing, which I think is amazing, is they're literally taking what the storylines are and they're filling in these gaps. Because as much as I love WWE, everyone knows that they plan things out kind of, but anything can be changed at any moment depending on how the crowd is taking it, how Vince McMahon feels about it. You could literally show up in the arena and be ready to go on, and Vince McMahon will turn to you and go, oh, by the way, remember how we said you were winning? You're not winning tonight. This is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and you're going to lose.
Wow.
And so what Boom Comics has been doing is stitching together these relationships and filling in the background of these things that are typically, things that, even though we love it, they're in a ring. We don't follow them at home.
Right.
Except for Toad Steve's, which is a different kind of kayfabe. Like Total Divas is different, Ms. and Mrs. is
Okay,
different.
Toad Steve's, I thought it was another nonsense word. I was like, tell me of your Toad Steve's.
But no, so Total Divas and Mr. and Ms. and like all of these things, they are different kinds of kayfabe because those are reality TV show kayfabes. And sometimes they interact with this one from WWE. It's like sometimes those storylines interact. In the same way with like Dark Horse.
Can we have Danielle come on Lore Masters?
Yeah. Oh
I want
yeah.
her to explain wrestling to me.
So good. Yeah.
But the same way that like Dark Horse and IDW, like some of it kind of mixes, but some of it doesn't. It's the same way where it's like, this is closer to a Kardashian thing, or this is closer to another thing. And sometimes these storylines will mix, but sometimes they just won't. And so what Boom has done, and I think they've done brilliantly, and they've also they've fleshed out these characters. Like there are these three guys known as the Shield. And the Shield, they're these dudes who used to hang out, like they've been through several mutations, but essentially they're these dudes that hang out in tactical gear.
No, just kidding.
Oh God, please! If they were mutant Ninja Turtles, who have wrestled in Mexico, that's a different story. Mexico do not care about your IP. So, but RoboCop has wrestled in the U.S. So,
I'd buy that for $1.
so.
I do feel like there's an everything is legal in New Jersey element to this.
That's
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But so with Boom, what they'll do is they'll take something like the story where these three dudes who were best friends, who stood up for each other, where they were good guys or bad guys, they were always buds. And we knew that one of them had turned heel against the others and had turned against his brothers. But they fleshed it out with really fun things where it would be like, oh, well, in the Boom comic, sometimes they will barbecue on top of the production trucks, and then one of them will get really mad that someone forgot potato salad, and that's relatable.
So are they in the? Is the production of a show in the?
Yes, it is a show within a show, like the show of wrestling.
Sure.
So the comic is about the
acknowledges-
people who are getting ready to film their matches. or like kind of that's the level of reality we're in.
Well, that's all of wrestling. All of wrestling at this point is very much like, we know we're doing a TV show. We know we have a production show. We know that we have people who work behind the scenes. We know we have a TriCaster because we do live. We know that we have all of these things. They won't say TriCaster, but we know
A camera.
But yeah, we know that we have cameramen. We know that we have security. We know we have all of this.
Okay.
But it's still somehow this TV show that goes on every week that always interrupts and people being assaulted, even if it's not necessarily a
seen
part
that
of the show.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice. I've noticed that these comics have gone over better than any other like iteration of attempted WWE stuff I've seen at the
Yes.
shop. It's been what, 2 years?
2 years,
right?
and it's because they delve into the character work that sometimes gets missed on the show.
Nice. So that's a great version of the filling in the gaps, fitting into continuity. You can watch everything without them, but these will enhance your experience. And they must be coordinating on some level, or they're just watching and writing their fan fiction real fast.
Well, everything that they do is typically about 6 months behind. what
Okay.
the
Oh,
WWE
okay.
is doing.
All right.
So it's literally like, oh, well, we've already seen it, and so we'll just write in the stuff that's already happening.
Cool.
Yeah.
And I know about this because there are ads for the Boom comic in the back of the Power Rangers Boom comics.
And I asked Xander for his pick for license.
I'm very excited for Power. I'm wearing the Blue Ranger shirt.
So
and my
tell us
communicator.
about, and I hopefully pulled the right cover, but we got Mighty Morphin Volume 1 in here.
So it does make noise if we want to. And it'll yell at me later. Yes, this is Mighty Morphin 1. So Boom Comics got the license for Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. There are other iterations of Power Rangers in comic book form. Most of them are not great.
So that is the thing with licensed comics. They are the easiest bet for a company to do, but as a consumer, you sort of, your mileage may vary on those. They're like one of the best ways to get into comics, but also you get those like, it doesn't always work out.
Yeah. But the Mighty Morphin run is fantastic.
I've been hearing the most amazing things about it.
Me too.
So good. And so it's by Kyle Higgins, and I actually got to interview him a couple of years ago when it was first coming out.
Nice.
And so I got to like pick his brain a little bit.
He's
on
like
that
an LA
too.
Comics buddy, so he's.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yay. And so the concept of it is basically if Power Rangers were written for a mature audience today. So that's because I didn't answer Zordon.
How could you not
Sorry.
answer?
You're a monster.
I gotta go. Yeah, exactly.
Rangers.
Yeah. So I like to think of it as like it's nostalgic in that it keeps the kind of lightheartedness, but it deals with the actual emotional toll that it takes on like these teenagers. Oh my God. And
What's the basic idea behind Power Rangers?
behind Power Rangers, it's teenagers with attitude that are chosen by this Zordon of Eltar, who's the man in the tube caught in his face.
I love making people explain things. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
You're
it's
so
great.
happy.
And he had an ancient war with this witch known as Rita Repulsa, who was...
we have a variant cover for Power Rangers 2, which is Rita Repulsa.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow.
Oh.
So good. And she's a great, like, villain in the comics. Like, because the show... I mean, I'm a Rangers fan, obviously, but it was stitched together from Super Sentai, which I actually...
What's a Super Sentai?
Super Sentai is the Japanese version of Power Rangers that came first, actually. And so...
So it goes Japanese television, American television, made out of pieces of Japanese television and new pieces added in.
Yep.
And then 25 more series of that.
Yep.
And then comics.
Comics.
Okay.
Yep. So this story is kind of like an alternate timeline of the Mighty Morphin era. So it's Trini, Billy, Kim, Jason. Who am I missing?
God.
Trini, Billy, Kim, Jason,
Who was your fave?
Zach, and then Tom.
Yeah.
Trini.
Billy was my favorite.
I really liked Billy.
Yeah.
He was the nerd.
He was. Yeah.
I always liked the girl, but I was just rebellious enough to be like, but not the pink one.
Right.
Even though I love the color pink, but I was like, the other one. That
So fun
Look,
fact.
we were trained to hate our own femininity, and it's fine.
She was literally played by an actress named Amy. It had my
That's
name
true,
on it.
Amy
but
Jo
I was like,
Johnson.
she's got a skirt in her costume. Screw you.
Yeah.
Like,
So the original
came
series
around. She's great.
that Mighty Morphin was based off of, the Super Sentai series, the Yellow Ranger was a boy who was actually named Boy. Like that was his name, was B-O-I. But that's why.
He was an internet person?
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, continue.
But that's why the Yellow Ranger doesn't have a skirt. Is because the footage they used, it was a man.
Okay, that's rad.
Yeah. But they played it off as like Trini knows Kung Fu, and you wear pants when you do Kung Fu, so.
Pants seemed reasonable to me.
Yeah.
They seemed way more reasonable. But I mean, skirts are great. Femmes are great.
Yeah,
Femme.
there's nothing wrong with the color pink or wearing skirts.
No,
I was just a
proud line
kid
of
who
Pink
was
Rangers.
only aware enough to be mad about things and not to understand the greater systems I was contributing to with my 8-year-old anger.
I just get along with boys better.
I'm not like other girls.
Yeah.
I'm like a nerd. Little
We
did
were in fact
know.
nerds and we had a ton of dude friends, so that was facts. But
We were always around for each other, and we didn't know. Nerd girls are everywhere.
then they invented the internet, and I was like, "You exist?
Yeah.
What? Like,
We have shared experiences.
Yeah. Let's relive the '90s on the Wednesday."
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, Buffy and Power Rangers.
Yeah.
So, but
I'm
yeah.
going to take us back to the 60s in like a second. So
Oh,
Yes.
nice. Okay. But the storyline is fantastic, and it's again experimenting with what a modern writer would do with those abilities.
So is it like mature but not grimdark?
Correct. Yeah, it's not a
Cool.
gritty reboot because it keeps that same kind of lightheartedness, and they joke around with each other. But the main arc that's been happening, is called the Shattered Grid. So they get their
The finale
powers.
came out today.
Yeah, it did. But they get their powers from something called the Morphin Grid. And so the Shattered Grid is reference to there's another dimension that they like tap into where the Power Rangers lost. And so they're taking, and Tommy, the Green Ranger, becomes evil and like follows Rita's rule. And so Rita's ruling, and now he's this like dark overlord. And the resistance is the Rangers without their powers. They're called the Coinless. And
Oh,
yeah.
sorry, that just sounds so cool.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
And not only that, there are a lot of nods to Ranger fans too, where later people who you know would become Rangers in later seasons are part of the Coinless without powers. And it's so cool. And like the Rangers in the current timeline that are defending, they lose their powers at one point, but because the Green Ranger comes from a different source, they tap into that and they gain like a pseudo versions of their powers, but they're all green. And so there's just a force of them and their costumes look the same, they're just all green. And it's incredible.
Okay, that's really
so Mighty Morphin, that's that storyline. There's also Go-Go Power Rangers, which came out, which is more focused on like the teen drama aspect of it, and it's more like an Archie, like there's teen drama, but also they're superheroes.
Do they tell stories that like are they fitting into the same continuity or are they just?
It can.
Okay.
It doesn't necessarily have to.
Yeah.
The characters are such archetypes that they kind of can fit no matter what.
And they did a mini-series for Pink, I think.
They did, and Pink got their own spin-off series type of thing.
Fine,
It's
like
just
I
Mighty
love
Morphin
because
Pink.
Forever Red is great,
Yeah,
and they did
yeah.
what Forever Blue. I love that they have done like a Pink series because I felt like it was necessary.
Exactly.
The picture you just saw was one of a series of, I've loved this. Several different companies have done these variant covers that
Yes.
look like toys that should exist.
Yeah, that was what was
But
just
there's
showing.
sort of a beautiful circularity to like the comic book cover of the fake toy of the thing that we all know from the thing that we grew up on and had actual toys of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One more thing I want to pitch because I know we got to get moving, but there's a crossover between Power Rangers and Justice League, which is it's so fun and it's like what you expect for a crossover. It's very like mini-series or whatever, but they team up with different superheroes from the DC universe, and at one point they also lose their powers. So there's a great quote in there where I think it was Batman was just saying like, we can't be bringing these people along, they're powerless, and Superman just goes, they're not powerless, and they raid like their enemy closet. So like Katana's mask goes on Trini with the katana and like Deadshot gear and stuff like that, and Kim gets Green Arrow's stuff.
No,
It's so good. It's very good.
That's amazing. We actually do have tons of time if we want to keep going, but I should mention that we would love your suggestions for our 5-minute topic for tonight.
Yeah.
If you want to start throwing those at us, so pretty sure Liz can figure out what to surprise us with.
But at the core of it, like what I like Power Rangers for, they really hit on it, where it's all about teamwork and working together and overcoming difficulties in personal life and dealing with that stuff in this like fantasy environment of fighting robots or fighting monsters and dinosaur robots. And it has really good moments. And like, I don't want to spoil too much, but like the stuff that goes into the other dimension, it's a really interesting study on what someone evil that has access to these powers would do. He creates like a legion of Black Rangers who are like because they have the heavy cannon axe. So they're like kind of the stormtrooper style. And like a legion of archers that are all Pink Rangers. And it's really, really cool.
Ooh, I'm getting Sinestro vibes.
Yeah.
I'm into it.
Yeah.
No, it's fantastic. And like you said, I think the
Give
finale
me
for
some
Shattered Grid just came out.
Lantern
Ranger Corps. I love it.
Ranger
The
Corps.
next crossover.
Yeah.
Green
Oh my
Lantern
God.
Corps Power Rangers specifically.
Done.
Make it happen.
Yeah.
I don't know what business deals you had to make that first one happen, but do them
Yeah,
again.
it did kind of come out of nowhere. Like nobody was expecting it. I don't think from the DC side or from the Ranger side. We're like, okay, yeah, and then it was super fun.
Hi.
Yeah.
Lanterns.
That would be so much fun.
And Alpha 5 plays big roles in all of the storylines.
I have never thought about like the commonalities actually between like Sentai things and Green Lantern. Like,
Yeah.
It is very,
You're being
Different
recruited
colors.
into a group of fighters. Some of you have a lot of you wear masks. Although
Yeah.
you don't wear full suits. There's a lot to be said about and I'd love to have you back to talk about that comes from a separate Japanese tradition of the sort of masked crime fighter or superhero type.
Yeah.
Like that they kind of were evolving in parallel on two continents.
Yeah,
the
it's
last
so
100
interesting.
Years.
Yeah.
Why were you going to take us to the 60s?
Well, because I wanted to discuss the Flintstones comics that have been coming out.
Ooh.
They've been coming out recently?
Have you read the new ones?
No, I didn't even know it existed. What's
Okay, so I'm
Fred
gonna...
getting up to?
Oh, what is Fred? Ooh, so much.
Wow.
So here's an idea of where you
Drama.
can take something that is a beloved series like the Flintstones, and you can use it to as a vehicle to either talk about things that are happening like real world,
I don't know.
modern
I'm
issues.
going on a journey. I don't know where
Oh,
you are.
you're going to talk about real world modern issues, or just to kind of invert what you knew as something else.
So this is definitely a different, add this to your list of, this is another thing you could do with
Here's
your
a
life.
way to do it.
If you can get them to agree to this somehow, you can be Mark
still
Russell.
have no idea.
Do they know? Maybe they didn't read them.
I don't think they've read them.
Although Mark Russell got nominated for every Eisner for this 12-part Flintstone series that was published last year by DC.
Wow.
And I've only read pieces of it, so I'm going to let you take this. Tell me about the Flintstones comic.
Yeah, go
Danielle.
on.
So the Flintstones comic is one we're in there. It's obviously the Flintstones, but it's definitely not the Yabba Dabba Doozies Flintstones.
I will. Did you see this going around Twitter? Somebody was like, "Can you imagine being the person if you pitched Yabba Dabba Doo in the room and it bombed? How stupid you would feel." Take chances, people.
Yeah,
Maybe your
exactly.
idea is Yabba Dabba Doo.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, and so I will not spoil Yabba Dabba Doo, but what I will say is that it deals with the ideas of toxic masculinity, cults, gay culture, polyamory,
What? In the
monogamy.
Flintstones.
The Flintstones is not.
They take it as sort of an exercise in watch them invent culture and do all of this very detailed riff on they're making up a religion, and this issue is every sort of it's a deconstruction of, it's a satirical look at modern life in terms of the prehistoric, which could have
that's
crashed
what-
and burned.
Sure.
It
That's
could have
what
been a
Flintstones
disaster.
was in the beginning. It was just a reflection of the current society of the time.
Right.
It was always having a dinosaur as a dishwasher or garbage disposal.
It
That's
was about the convenience of modern devices
Yeah.
in
Yes.
a very transformative time, but this is about taking that shit apart.
wow.
And figuring out how they get there, and this is one of those where it's 12 issues. All 12 issues, it's a year. I don't want to spoil any of it. And as much as I want to say that, this sounds but this ain't your granddaddy's Flintstone.
This is a thing that can often go wrong, but with the right team, Have y'all been reading? I still need to finish it, but have you read Exit Stage Left?
No.
The Snagglepuss
No,
Chronicles?
no. I've heard it's
What?
great. I'm
What is happening?
No, that's on my list to read this weekend because I've heard it.
Heavens to Megatroid, like Snagglepuss.
Heavens to Megatroids.
So
I've read some panels and I'm like, I am so in.
I would be very curious your take on this because in this one, Snagglepuss is a closeted gay 1950s playwright.
Okay, cool. I'm
Like
in.
Snagglepuss
It fits.
No, Snagglepuss is Tennessee Williams.
Okay.
Like that's what
It's
this
like
is.
all
I
this.
cannot wait
It's
to
about like his friends getting blacklisted, and then you end up being like, you at a certain point you're like, you can't believe that Exit Stage Left was literally already the thing because it seems like it should be made up for the version of this, which is a specific parody of 1950s repression.
Yeah.
Like,
but it was already what he would say.
yeah,
It was a catchphrase.
So that was just a 6-parter, but Mark Russell is on kind of a tear right now.
So I wonder if stuff like this, that has to be kind of tailor-made for specifically us as the demographic, like people who've grown up with these things. Let's turn it on its head.
Got to rely on our recognition, but our interest in something else.
Yeah. Because it's working. Like, I'm going to go read the Flintstones comic. I never was before.
Right, and that is a way that you can take something that is a licensed property and make it into something transformative.
Mm-hmm.
Which is interesting because it, like, again, that could have gone really badly.
Yeah.
We could spend the next, like, 20 years being like, guys, that thing they did with Snagglepuss.
Yeah.
Like, wow, whose idea was that?
Yeah,
Like,
No good.
But it is interesting because it means that, like, licensed comics can be seen as sort of an easy money thing in comics, but there's nothing about them that necessarily... They can be just as risky as other kinds of comics. You're just taking different risks.
Also, it's not hindering the creativity from this license, because you'd think that the company, whoever owns the license, would be very strict, like, this is what it has to be, and it can't be this.
And there are a lot of stories like that,
Sure.
especially like when you talk to artists who've worked on like the Sonic comics and other stuff about sort of like the challenges of making sure when you're working with a separate office that you need to run all of your Mickey Mouse comics by to be like, does this Mickey look enough like Mickey? Is he doing things Mickey would do? And what I'm always fascinated by that because I get both sides. Like if you're making Mickey, you can't have someone going off and being like, here's the one where Mickey lures children into a trap.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, like...
this is my punk rock Mickey. And it's like, well, but I also have to sell these parks based on the other Mickey.
Right.
Yeah.
And they are more costly to run than your comic book.
Or they're like, he literally just doesn't look like Mickey and we don't like it. You know, then there's that bit. So it's an interesting thing, although it can be very frustrating for artists, like to try to sort of, it's amazing to kind of watch, but like people also do great work in that, like trying to do likenesses can be its own nightmare. Because you have to get the artists approved by a lot of people, but you know, I also get that from the other side, where it's like, if for some reason someone was drawing my face, it would be nice to know that they were good at faces. I don't know.
Going back to Buffy, using Sarah Michelle Gellar as a model, like, it was all over the place because she's a real person.
Yeah.
And I feel like there were some times when maybe they were more allowed to use more of her face than others. Depending on several factors, probably.
This tea is delicious.
I love water. It's really
Hail hydration.
Although a significant factor in Buffy season 8 being the breakout hit it was cover artist Joe Chen.
So some of them are like photorealistic, incredible.
Just you get some really incredible work and people working under what must be very challenging constraints.
Yeah.
Like make an image we've never seen before that also looks exactly like the work of a bunch of other artists and real people that aren't you. Go.
Yeah.
Insane.
We need something that looks like it was directed by Jane Espenson, but also looks like it has the face of what we know of to be Willow and Buffy.
And Dawn is a centaur. Go.
Yeah.
And also,
and also that.
and also, while we're at it.
Yeah.
So yeah, you get really fun stuff.
Yeah, I mean, some other ones that you've pulled here, like Adventure Time is a lot of fun.
This is like, these were ones that like they were a crazy breakout hit in the shop, and they also like are a great example of people like who aren't, they're not reinventing Adventure Time because Adventure Time is already its own cool subversive thing.
Yeah.
They're just doing more Adventure Time, but it's comics.
Yeah, and
Right.
the show Adventure Time lends itself to like a comic format where it's short and.
I would love to have like Pendleton Ward on here and be like, which webcomics do you love? Because I know you would.
Yeah.
Oh, I know.
Is it Achewood? I feel like it's Achewood.
It's 100% Achewood, right?
Right? Okay. I've never actually gotten to have this conversation with someone, but like,
It's Achewood.
it's gotta be. Because he took Achewood and he's like, I'm gonna make a version of this that makes like a little more sense, but not like that much more because it would stop being fun.
I'm just waiting for him to call something the Thing of Evil. That's all I'm waiting for.
It might, I mean, hit us up if that's already happened in Adventure Time and we just don't know about it.
Yes, please.
So one cool thing is like, this was a great example. Kaboom, an imprint of Boom. I don't know, Boom just does a great job with this stuff, so we're gonna talk about Boom a lot.
Really nailing it.
But like, the editors on Adventure Time got incredibly cool talent for these books. Not like the people who ordinarily do licensed books suck, but like they made specific, really interesting choices. This was some of the first paper comics work I ever read from Ryan North.
Okay.
This is basically my obsession. Writer of Squirrel Girl and Dinosaur Comics and just all-purpose genius. It was recently the 3-year anniversary of the time he got stuck in a hole. Do you all know the story?
Like the Chilean miners?
A little less intense.
Okay.
But he did get, like, he took his dog down into, like, you skateboard in it, and it's a depression in the ground.
Oh, a gutter.
No, but like on purpose, people skateboard in a hole in the ground.
Half pipe.
One of those things.
Okay. I thought you were trying to think of a word, and I'm like playing
There might be. I
charades.
assumed there was
don't
a
know.
word for it.
Okay.
Does anyone know what that is
A
called?
wash?
Maybe.
But it's a hole.
Long story short, he went down there with the dog, and they could not get out.
Oh, no.
Because you don't go in holes.
He live tweeted it.
Of course.
And everyone was like, started playing it like an adventure game, like, what do you have with you?
Yeah.
And eventually the solution
Light the
involved
match.
like his umbrella and something to get up to the edge so that the dog could get like, it was literally, they were like,
so
combine
good.
this with that.
Yeah.
I love that that's their solution and wasn't, you have a phone, call 911.
I don't remember if that came up.
Call the fire department.
what?
They have a ladder.
Yeah, knowing us, it didn't.
No.
We were definitely like, well, what do you have on you? Well, what's that leash?
Yeah.
Push
Instead
the
of being
fourth
like- It was
brick
like,
on the
yeah.
right. Like,
You
I
can get
copied-
out, but the dog can't, or the dog can get out, but you can't. And it was like, it was one of those, get
Yeah.
the duck across the pond kind of
Yeah,
situations.
yeah.
But like, anyway, Ryan North is a genius. And he was a great pick for these comics. And they went on to start recruiting, like, because Adventure Time is a property that lends itself to this kind of risk-taking, they got all kinds of indie cartoonists to do short stories.
Oh,
and
fun.
and backups and things like that. And because Adventure Time is already training the kids to be sort of more artistically flexible than any of our previous generations were, they roll with it.
Yeah.
You will often have an example, like, you can't always show kids, like, Punk Rock Mickey. Sometimes they'll be like, yay! And sometimes they'll be like, that's weird. It's not, that's not
what I'm
right.
used
That's
to,
not
yeah.
what Mickey looks like. And because Adventure Time is already sort of a subvert your expectations kind of visually surprising and flexible palette, like you can throw all this stuff at these kids and they're like, I roll with it. Yep. Weird mindscape issue? Sure.
Yeah. Why not?
Anyway,
In
great
that
licensed comics.
In that same vein, there was also the series of Avatar: Last Airbender comics.
I meant to
Legend
talk
of
about those,
Korra.
yes.
Yeah. So, I'm just
us
very
about those.
excited. Yeah. So, well, it's just that I love the series, the animated series, for both of those. But in the comics, you can, because they don't have the backing of like the Nickelodeon broadcast stamp, they can go a little more mature with it, like exploring Korra and Asami's relationship at the end of Legend of Korra, or finding Zuko's mother. Like that was the whole like storyline of the Avatar comics, and so it's just really nice to experience that with these characters. That something that you would never see animated.
The same thing with, so the Gem comics are something that have been.
Yes. IDW, I think, for the Gem
I
comics,
believe
and
they're
Dark Horse
IDW.
for Airbender.
Yeah.
And those are great because the Airbender comics have been overseen directly by the show creators in
Right.
concert with amazing comic book creators.
Yeah, and it feels like Avatar.
Irene Coe, yeah.
Yeah.
It does feel like Avatar. Now, Gem feels like if I grew up and made Gem and all of my ships came true. Because that's what it is. The Gem comics, the TV show is great, but it is very much the plot of the TV shows. I've tried to go back and watch them. I love them, but it's like Gem and the Holograms get invited to do a concert or a charity or whatever. The Misfits get really jealous, and then they try to ruin it, and then Showtime Synergy, a fake lion shows up, everything's happy. And so in the comic, there's kind of less of that, like, only one girl band can win thing. But most importantly, I
wish I'd pulled some pictures for Gem. The redesigns are so good.
They're so good. But if you are someone who loved Gem, there is a very important episode where Kimber, who is Gem's sister, who plays the guitar, and she is a redhead, and she was like the songwriter, but she would very often be...
Hi, Kimber.
Hello. You're going to play someone in a second.
Okay, here I go.
Actually, it's perfect. Actually, it's really perfect. So Kimber is a very sweet girl who is kind of quiet and shy, and she's a little bit of a brat.
Oh.
And then one day she gets into an argument with Gem about songwriting and wanting to be on a song.
Am I Gem or not yet?
No.
Okay.
You are Stormer.
Stormer.
Stormer is a misfit, but she is the misfit with a heart of gold and beautiful blue hair.
Yay! I normally have blue hair.
See? I told you, it was perfect.
Soon. That's my natural color.
It was perfect. And so one day they're both having a tantrum and they wind up at the same speakeasy with these people called the Limp Lizards who wind up being everywhere even though they suck. And so
a lot to
no one knows why
there.
the Limp Lizards are there. But so Stormer and Kimber.
Yeah.
Like the people were like, oh my God, we have like two of the people from the best band, and Stormer is also like the like the songwriter, but not the lead singer, and she plays like the regular old piano.
Regular keyboard, not guitar.
But so they write this beautiful song together, and they're like, well, screw y'all, we don't need you anymore, because their song becomes #1, and they hang out, and those were the faces that launched 1,000 ships.
Oh, of course. I did it right now. I shipped them.
And in the comic, they are a couple because they know exactly what they want. So it'll be one of the...
I think Kelly Thompson and Sophie Campbell, did a lot of the work on these. I'm not sure if other folks probably also worked with them on these series. But I'm shouting them out because they're great.
But so this was one of those ones where you can take a licensed property and use it for, I don't know, wish fulfillment?
Yeah.
I almost said fish fulfillment. That's also right. Sorry, Legendary. So it was like my beautiful bisexual heart was like, oh my God, what? And so they're just a flat out couple. And so even when they all have problems and like, the Misfits are still that punk band, and the Gem and the Holograms are that pop band, there's always like Kimber and Stormer who are like, we don't care, we're super in love, get it together.
Aww,
and
that's incredible.
They are so cute. And
now I have to read the Gem and the Holograms.
and Stormer real thick.
Oh, nice.
Which it turns out is a shape that people come in.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people are thick with 2 C's.
Yes.
And Stormer is one. And their relationship is like...
I wish I'd loaded these pictures. Sorry, y'all.
Who knew?
Sophie Campbell, Gem and the Misfits. You'll get it.
It's very genuine and just a lot of love between the two of them. Like it's not just a ship where it's like, oh, it's cool that they make out. It's like, no, like these characters have a deep and abiding love and respect for each other, and the people in their lives have a deep and abiding respect for their relationship.
It's so good.
I wonder if this kind of speaks to like cultural taste of where Gem and the Holograms and Power Rangers and stuff, when it was on TV, it's very formulaic. It's like the monster of the week, it's the problem of the week, whatever. Mm-hmm. But now we take those properties, the licensing, and attach like writers that will take that, turn it on its head, or create compelling stories. And if that's just the taste of society in general, like appreciating good writing, or if that's specifically to us, like that core demo.
I want to say part of it is probably the fact that, like, those, or like each of those started out in kind of the you can assume everyone is watching this in a serialized manner format.
Right.
And now are in the, no, it's fine. You can generally assume
wherever.
that you'll pick up volume 1 and start at the beginning, so it's okay to tell these sort of so the question of serialization, which has changed much on television, I'm now wondering if that argument holds up, because Adventure Time succeeds by being largely not serialized.
Yeah.
Like, you can mostly watch those in any old order.
That's true. There are elements that connect it all together.
Yeah, you absolutely.
don't need it.
Yeah, you absolutely can, but it does. I think with those, as far as being more comfortable with the characters, kind of getting into whatever adventures.
Yeah.
It does help if you have watched all of it.
Yeah, it does build on itself.
Yeah.
And of course, you have like the full-on Steven universe. This is serialized and you know it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you absolutely cannot just drop in a random.
Some of
You will
them,
not know
but
what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's maybe, I would say, once a season, there's a Steven universe where it's like, oh, you don't have to know anything.
This is
for
just a one-off.
But it's
that being said, that's interesting that you're using Steven Universe as like an example of that, because I feel like that show had the slowest build towards the serialization. It was very subtle. Like, you had to get a good couple of episodes in before they started talking about like the origins or the background or whatever.
And I wonder, like, I haven't gone back to watch the Power Rangers I grew up on. I don't remember that's a good face.
Yeah.
How much, like, did they build up to big dramatic season finales?
So they did eventually, because with like the Green Ranger, that whole thing was serialized. Of like, there's an evil Ranger, we're turning him good, da-da-da-da. And I remember the reveal of the White Ranger being a huge deal. Like a televised big deal. Like, my parents knew it was happening, and I was like, but that's the show that I watch.
I feel like that was around the same time that the Phoenix Saga and the Dark Phoenix Saga were also kind of a deal. And weren't they all on Fox? So I feel like that was like kind
the
of
animated series.
Yeah, so I feel like that was...
Which I was learning to program a VCR just so I could make sure I had the X-Men, like...
I have tapes and tapes of homemade Power Ranger recordings. Yes.
A lot of Sailor Moon.
Because I remember that...
It was on at 7 in the morning. Whose idea was that?
I watched it at 7 in the morning.
What?
Sailor Moon. I would get up to watch Sailor Moon on UPN. Or whatever. Yeah.
Or USA, I think.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Anyway.
I didn't get up. I just learned to program a VCR.
Maybe that's why I'm a morning person. It might be Sailor Moon.
Oh. Look at them training us to be good adults.
Dang
Yeah.
it, there were valuable lessons. I just missed them. I learned to rely on technology.
But yeah, and like going back to it, the character exploration in the Power Ranger comics, like I said, they're taking the concepts of the original show, but they're tweaking them. Like, oh, so the Yellow Ranger does have these abilities, and the Pink Ranger has these abilities, type of thing. Yeah. It's just fascinating.
Oh, I'm going back and I'm reading all of these, by the way.
There's another one that I forgot to mention. There was Power Rangers Aftershock, which is a comic that comes after the most recent movie, which was also very good.
I didn't see the movie.
I went in with the lowest expectations. Like, it's Power Rangers, I'm gonna see it, but came away pleasantly surprised by how good it was. Yeah.
So does that coordinate with the comic book storylines?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Yeah, that one's the one that's now the movie is like gritty reboot type of thing, but they do still kind of keep the humor of it.
Nice.
And then Aftershock is just continuing that story in comic book form.
So specific comic book sequel, another common emotive license. We haven't really talked about straight up adaptation, which is sort of its own whole thing. There's both the like adapting a story from prose or whatever else into comics, and there's sort of the one that's designed as like a companion piece, which they were traditionally not great, but it was like, the official X-Men movie comic when X-Men came out.
Yeah.
Bendis has this great story. I think it was in, I don't remember if it was in Fortune or Glory or if it was in, because he had a couple where he would do these short things and kind of just throw them into graphic novels and be like, here's some stuff I wrote.
Here.
Yeah, so he
Read this.
read this thing, I wrote it. So he had this great story about the time when he was determined to write a panel for panel recreation of the first Indiana Jones.
Oh.
And so he's drawing it and writing it and literally pausing so that not every scene, every shot was going to be something he recreated.
Wow.
And I believe this was also the story where at the same time he was eating a lot of these puddings that came in cans. Like this chocolate pudding.
The writer or Indiana Jones?
No, Brian Michael Bendis.
Cool.
Because he was like at this
Checking.
You
point,
wrote
he was
fan
like,
fiction about Indiana Jones eating.
yeah, he
pudding
was like
cups.
10 or something. So he's trying to draw every single shot.
Oh wait, that detail was left out. He's like 10 doing this.
Yeah, he's a
That's
baby.
adorable.
I thought this was like a full-grown man who's like, I'm gonna do this.
No, he's like he's a baby.
I love pudding
Baby
cups. I'm Indiana Jones.
Baby Bendis.
Yeah, so
Got
Baby
it.
Bendis is trying to do his adaptation, which is one of those frame by frames, except he doesn't realize that that's not the way that it works.
Sure.
I think maybe after he'd seen like the or something, so he's like doing it of Indiana Jones. He's eating these like pudding cup, like these pudding, not even cups. It was like this pudding that would come in a can. Back when you would have those ones where you'd have the key ring that you would do,
Yeah, the
and you would
pop top.
eat it. Yeah, which I never had, but apparently they were these like shelf stable ones. And he ate so much pudding. There is a way that I can say this. That what he expelled was blue
Because it was blue pudding?
because the dye in the pudding,
That made
Was
like
blue?
chocolate dye somehow came out as blue.
it came out
Kind
as
of-
blue once your body processed it.
What he expelled. Was shot for shot in comics.
What he expelled was a shot for shot.
Yeah. So that was his era of taking on appropriate challenges.
Yeah, so he was
mostly
because-
pudding in comic book
he was,
departments.
He was using the pudding to keep himself awake because he couldn't do caffeine because he was a child.
Sure.
So he was trying to use the sugar so that he could make sure that he got every detail right.
What an enterprising young man.
Goodness.
That I just remembered this in the middle of that too. I had a question for you, a comics question. So, like I said before, I'm not well versed in comics per se, but something they do in the Ranger comics that is really good is that they will take dialogue that's happening in one scene and it could apply to both scenes as like their transition. And they do it a lot and they do it super well. I don't know if that's like a staple thing that happens in comics or if this was specific to this one.
Making it a central part of the story, that's not routine.
Sure.
Like, or making, like, reliance on that as a device is not widespread.
Okay. 'Cause I
So
know
that
Frey
sounds
did
very
that
cool.
To some extent.
What?
Frey did that too to some extent.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
would take different things.
A
and make it-
line would apply to the new scene or whatever.
And I feel like that's a technique that's come in between comics and TV. This sort of like
Feels
ironic
very
cut.
TV.
But like it is one of those wonderful things that you can do in comics because you get text and images to play with. and
Yeah.
unhooking them gives you a lot of narrative possibilities.
Yeah.
I was talking about this on a recent show, but like I love the ability, and you can do this to a certain extent. You can do it in film, but it works slightly differently. You can have people tell a story that is a lie in comics incredibly effectively because they just tell you like, and it was a quiet morning, and you're looking at a panel of like a shootout.
Right.
And you're like, yep, okay.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Oh, it's
Keep
irony.
going with
You
the
were
story.
unreliable.
Yeah, and it's so easy and clear
Yeah.
for the audience. Like you can lay that out in a really beautiful way. Like, and it's an interesting thing in terms of adaptation because just in the differences of mediums, it's like you make all these trade-offs. Where I know this came out today. Rick and Morty versus Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes.
I'm gonna be reading that later.
We were lucky enough to have Pat Rothfuss on the show last month. I know.
What?
I know. He came to the Wednesday Club.
Holy crap! I love.
It's fine.
Oh my god, I love
Yeah.
Painkiller Chronicles.
Yeah, right? And music.
See, like fantasy novels, that's where I live.
He co-wrote this with Jim Zub, who
Oh,
is
okay.
a like kick-ass comics vet, who's been like just like Jim Zub. You should all be following. If you have any interest in writing in indies or breaking into comics, you got to be following this guy because over the last like 10 years, he just worked and did indie after indie after indie and just made it happen. Like and eventually like started doing the official D&D comics.
Right.
And like now he's been writing like the Avengers.
Right.
You know.
Because that name is familiar to me, someone who's like outside of comics.
Oh
So,
yay!
Yeah.
Go Jim Zub.
He did it.
You're rad, and very nice. I've met him a couple times. Please come visit us. Rick and Morty versus Dungeons and Dragons is out. It is one of those rare, like, how many companies did you get to cooperate to make this happen?
Just look at that cover.
It's so
It's
good.
an alternate cover. It's the variant, but it made me so happy for obvious reasons.
Yes.
Yeah.
And of course, I was like, just started straight up reading it. It's not even a joke. It's like a realistic character sheet.
No way.
It's
Oh my god.
it's just his actual character sheet for a like 5th edition character.
Oh, wow.
So, but Rothfuss was talking to us a bit about the challenges of, first of all, he's primarily a prose writer. So this is his first comics work. And like Jim Zub was helping him to sort of like corral because he could do great versions of the way that, for example, dialogue goes in a Rick and Morty cartoon, but like your space is limited in a very different way in comics.
Yeah.
So there's a great thing in the back there where Jim Zub says sort of complimentarily Pat Rothfuss is like a whirlwind of great emotions and dialogue or something like that. And Rothfuss is like, that's a nice way of saying this guy has no idea how many words can go on a page.
Yeah. Oh yeah, a whirlwind of dialogue.
Yeah. So, but
That's so funny.
They obviously worked it out, but like you have different rhythms and different tools at your disposal. So for instance, in comics, like if you're writing prose, you get to tell us as much or as little about someone's appearance as you want. But we sometimes have to guess about like about
Ethnicity or orientation.
you can leave
like,
that
whatever.
intentionally
Yeah.
vague in a way that like in comics, unless you literally leave them off screen or
Right.
they're wearing a mask, you got to make a choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what's also interesting is you can describe stuff, you can put it in the background in a comic, and it is a secret in a way that is harder to hide in, say, prose.
Yeah.
Or you can like, if you don't have thought bubbles in a comic, we don't know what someone is thinking and we're going by their expressions. You can have that mystery, whereas in like, you'd have to literally say, she said with a mysterious smile.
Yeah.
And in comics, you can just have the smile and have everybody else guess. But
Yeah.
you are, of course, collaborating with an artist to make that happen. Troy Little is the artist of these. Anyway.
This just brought this back. I don't know why I didn't talk to you about this beforehand, but the Adventure Zone comic.
Yes!
It's a licensed comic from a podcast.
Like what?
And
Right.
Patrick Rothfuss wrote the intro. But they dealt with that specific issue where these three characters everybody had been listening to on a podcast and making fan art where it was intentionally vague on the ethnicity.
Yeah.
And then they had to be like, well, we have to nail this down into something. And so Taco, the wizard, who's an elf wizard, they intentionally made him blue because they're like, we don't want to stomp on anybody giving him any other race or anything like that. But that in turn ended up being problematic too because I guess there were like depictions of Jewish people is being blue in comics or something like that.
That was
I don't. I
Not comics, but political cartoons, where it was like an issue.
Oh.
And so they didn't know, but they're like, well, we're going to go forward with this, but know that it's a blue fantasy race. It's not a commentary on this, that, or the other thing.
Interesting.
And those are like interesting things. It was a little disappointing because at the time a lot of people were throwing some real negativity at Carrie Peach, the incredibly talented
Yes,
artist who worked
yeah.
with them on those books.
Yeah.
I literally just read that and can't remember what they settled on for Taco's physical appearance, although he looks fabulous.
Yeah.
But like it's a fascinating example of adaptation from just like the weirdest medium jump of all time.
Yeah.
And
Best
improvised
comic.
audio-only D&D adventure to a narrative comic that needs to stand on its own and ideally not contain any copyrighted references.
Right.
Right.
Which was an issue, especially
they-
with Dungeons and Dragons.
They airsat some of the characters, they do all this thing, but they, like, because they did ultimately tell a very satisfying, like, I think, and I haven't checked with the internet, I think it is generally agreed that they came to a good solution on that, and, like,
Yeah.
the book is great. It is wildly best-selling right now.
It is. But I wonder about, because I read it and I liked it, but I'm like, I wonder if this enjoyment is coming because I listened to the podcast. I wonder if someone
If
coming
you've read
fresh.
it and haven't, like, please let us know.
Yeah,
Because I
I'm
wondered the same
genuinely
thing.
interested to. 'Cause I'm like, I think it's good, but I have all of this back catalog of knowledge
Yeah.
that is influencing what I'm reading.
Yeah.
If I'm coming at this with nothing, I wonder,
And that's great because they play with comics because your DM will pop in from the corner of the panel.
Yeah.
He just sort of like it peels down and you kind of see Griffin's face when he's talking to them because of course making him a character in the book is difficult because he's usually the voice of the
The
world.
narrator, yeah.
And I think the
you gotta,
dad did a lot of the writing on
Yeah,
the comic
Clint.
and that's adorable.
It is.
But yeah, so I mean, you got to OD on McElroy.
Yes. I love it. I love the McElroys so much.
Hey guys.
Hi.
Oh yeah,
And I've been listening to Positivity too. So
Apparently,
good job.
In a manner I cannot explain, I now have a podcast with Travis.
Yeah.
No, how did that happen? I don't know. I don't know.
You know why?
You're
Because you're the
incredible.
best and because Travis is the best.
He's so nice and good.
He is such a, that sweet baby boy. And
Yeah.
his sweet baby boy nails.
Oh, yeah.
He's so good. He's so sweet.
This is now the McElroy Appreciation Hour.
Done.
They are a family of podcasters and just generally great people.
Yeah.
And
They wrote a comic off of their D&D.
Yes.
Yeah.
thing.
You are
Podcast.
probably, there's a good chance you're familiar with it because I believe several of you like the Dungeons and Dragons.
The Dungeons and Dragons, you say? Go on.
So that's all quite exciting.
Mm.
Thank you. And so, yeah, take, I guess, my opinions with a grain of salt, but like, he's real
like
nice.
it. Yeah.
They're great.
True story.
There was a point, there's a tweet, I think Kendra Kendra, who I follow online, like a few years ago, and it keeps coming back up. There's sort of interesting intersecting subcultures happening.
Yes.
Where somebody, like, at some point, someone was like, they were making a joke about common, like, shared interests for indie cartoonists. And this was several years ago at this point, but they were like, are you a something indie cartoonist, a McElroy indie cartoonist, or a wrestling indie cartoonist? And I feel like they're all merging into one now.
Yeah.
I mean,
Because-
not wrong. You look at Sitterson or yeah, wow.
But now, like, we all, with the internet, we're all such passionate fans of things. When we have friends that, like, for instance, you've convinced me to watch Angel. You know, if there's someone that's not familiar with something, like the best.
I will watch the bad ones with you if you
Okay.
get interested in starting with the bad ones. Although I'm still I'm so
Okay.
conflicted over your advice.
We'll have an Angel pajama party.
No, start with season 5. At least start with episode 1 of season 5. And then
It's the way
we'll
what's
see.
happening.
Interestingly, the first episode that I watched of Doctor Who was Tennant's Blink, and it was so confusing.
Because he's not
It's
in
like,
it.
he's not in it. I was like, this is a great episode, but is the Doctor always in a TV, like in a DVD? I don't understand it. Now I know, but that was the introduction episode.
well, the Doctor's like you, just shows up in people's TVs.
Xander's in your house.
I am. I'll take your video games.
Xander is a supervillain,
I am.
Yeah, wow.
stealing your games through the TV.
You turned heel real quick.
I sure did. Oh, I love playing the heel. So I LARP. I don't know if this comes as a shock to you, but one LARP
We're
session.
all LARPers here.
Yeah.
I've never actually LARPed.
I know. I need to
Red
get
is
you
the
out.
closest I've
No,
done it.
I need
There's
to.
a camper that's coming up. Well,
I don't know what
we'll
that means.
coordinate schedules.
I mean, I
So-
know what camping is.
So we'll go out on the Friday and we'll set up camp and we'll have all weekend LARP. So Friday night, Saturday night into Sunday. But during that time, you take an NPC shift if you're a player character, which means you take an hour and you go and you play an NPC for whatever they need. So
Oh,
the
so
whole camp does it, so everyone takes turns.
Nice.
That is
And one of my NPC shifts, they were doing like a knights tournament, and I got to be the heel for the thing, and it was so much fun.
How much making out is there at these LARP camps?
A lot. I mean, it's consensual, and
Of course.
yeah, and it might be in character, it might be out of character, it might be after hours.
Oh,
Who
my.
knows? And spend some time at the tavern.
Maxie.
LARPing is a good time. Yeah.
Into it.
I'm sure it's probably possible to also go through these and not choose that experience. if that is
Absolutely.
not a thing that appeals to you,
It's-
but it
it's
might be a
very-
thing that appeals to you.
Yeah, it's very much tailor-made for that. Like, there's a lot of check-in and everything like that, and it's great. Yeah.
Yeah, like hey, like because there's a lot of you can do like a hey OOC, we cool?
Right, exactly. So you do this. At least the one that I do. This means
Can
out
you
of
come
character.
on Lore Masters and explain LARPing signals?
I can. There are people that are way better than I.
You
would be.
introduced me to one of them.
It's true.
Actually.
Jonea Kemper is a LARP scholar, and she's based in New York. So I wish she could come out here. But
Please come to California. If
Yes.
for some reason you're randomly watching Wednesday Club right now. I just met
absolutely.
you and I don't want to creep you out, but you seem amazing.
No, she's incredible, and she would be able to tell you because not all LARPs are like that, and with any community there are problematic issues, but for the most
You mean
part,
sometimes people behave badly?
Oh no! What a new concept.
I do stand-up comedy. I don't know what any of that's about.
Oh.
What's it like being a female comedian?
Oh, everyone's wonderful, and no one has to worry about anything else.
Pleasant surprise. Yep.
Anyway, I didn't mean to derail Wednesday Club into the LARP talk.
Oh, I was going to be like, it's great comics, but no one's free of it. It's fine. It's fine.
Wait, what? Because I'm getting my recommendations list. Flintstones, Gem and the Holograms.
Yes, focusing on good things and not anyone who ever behaves badly.
Oh, I see.
Lovely is that going so clearly. I need to LARP. I'm calling you out. That just scrolled right by.
Yes, Sam. So it's kind of speaking to that a little bit. How are you in relation to like a problematic author in the comic space and their separation from the work?
Oh, I'll be struggling with it for the rest of my life. It's case
tough.
by case.
I remember for me, I was a huge fan of Orson Scott Card, and I loved his stuff.
He broke my heart.
And it was a mess.
I used a screen name from one of his books for years.
Really?
It was the Speaker for the Dead is the first book I ever stayed up all night with.
Wow.
It was like the book that taught me empathy.
Wow.
And seeing things from other people's perspectives, and how can you write that book and not...
Exactly. And he writes gay characters, and they're well done. And I'm like, why are you like this?
Yeah, it's very... it's, for me, I will say that, like, it's... It's really hard when things are third or fourth degree accusations because those are when I'm like, okay, I will watch out for you.
Right.
But
you're on my list.
Yeah, but it's also one of those things where it's like I am I was a paralegal before I started doing all talking about things for a living. And so but once someone comes forward that is, and people will be like, well, where's your proof? Well, testimony is proof. That's the way the law works. Mm-hmm. But once someone comes forward, it's like, this is my firsthand experience. It's like,
yeah.
Well.
And there is an element of it where it's like, I have noticed in myself that there are times where I don't set out to boycott a thing, but I just lose enthusiasm for it.
That's true. That is, yeah.
And that's a thing where I never quite dealt with and we're on a broadcast, so we're gonna try to avoid names and specifics. Sure. But there are issues where going back to sort of political differences, I didn't set out to boycott the Ender's Game movie, even though they made an adaptation out of a book I loved, but I never got around to seeing it. Because the associations that I have with his ideas, despite how much I loved his fiction, have changed my relationship to the work in a way that just turns out.
Now, on the topic for today with licensing stuff, if they were to do an Ender's Game comic or something like that was but it's totally not involving Orson Scott Card, would it still have that same kind of effect? Do you think?
I don't know.
I haven't read them, so I guess I'm in that. If that answers the question of even though I know they exist, I didn't sit down with them.
Yeah.
But again, it wasn't something that I set out as a principled stand to avoid them. Not that I would blame anyone who decided to.
Sure.
But it has been an interesting thing for me to observe. Sort of soft internal boycott. Sometimes happens and sometimes doesn't.
And it's true, because sometimes you don't even it's one of those things where it's in the background. We're all going about our days, and sometimes it's just so much, y'all. Yeah. There's just a deluge, and it's again, no names, no anything. Doing comedy, being in certain spaces, it's been particularly difficult for me because 10 people.
Sure.
And so you just kind of get to a point where you're like, today's going to be a happy day where I do something that I really like. And you're not necessarily looking to be boycott Betty, but just, I'm just not doing this today.
Yeah.
And then
I feel like it's a healthy way to do it.
And today winds up being never days.
Yeah.
Never any days.
But there are, it's I can't argue that I have a particularly clean take on it, because there's stuff that I still go back to, even though I know, I don't know. What is your answer, since you were kind enough to ask?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm just curious in general because, like I mentioned with the Orson Scott Card stuff, that just specifically stuck out in my mind of like the separation. And I think the consensus that I've come to is that when anybody is making something, art, comics, movies, video games, whatever it is, they're making it and that's their experience. But me taking in the media, that's my experience, and they can't take that from me. So whatever positive feelings or place that it took me to at that time, regardless of what the author intended or what they have done with their own life, it doesn't affect me and my consumption of the media. And if I need to go back to it because it reminds me of a certain time, then I should be free to do that regardless. But I don't hold it against anybody that does boycott things because it's for totally legit reasons.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you can recognize that there are. I think you can recognize when it's like, here's a thing that I hold very dear, and I understand that it was made by someone who, as a person, probably super sucked, and I would hate them, and I do not like them. But I can recognize it as this is a piece of art. And I think that that's easier when that is a historical thing than when it is
I grandfather in a lot of people.
Well, we kind of have to. Than a happening now thing.
Right. Because there's accountability now.
Is there?
Well, there's when it's someone who's still around, it's sort of like you could be like, man, you could change your ways tomorrow, and so the fact that you haven't might impact my
potential.
Like on that level, like where it's sort of like you have time to get it together theoretically.
But there's also now a direct connection to these artists and these creators with something like Twitter or just the internet in general, where they get that feedback as opposed to an angry fan letter that maybe one person wrote or something like that. You get the accountability of people being mad, and I feel like back in the day, you don't necessarily need to hear that. Like, you have a publisher or an agent or whatever that's protecting you.
Hate mail, but
yeah, when like Cthulhu and stuff came out, like
when Cthulhu came out, H.P. Lovecraft was talking to his agent, like, I don't want any hate mail, please.
And he's like, well, good, because I'm not gonna. We don't.
Y'all Google Lovecraft.
Yeah.
That's a name I'll go ahead and say on the internet, because at some point, unfortunately, you have to encounter the fact that Lovecraft was a complicated individual with a bunch of really crappy ideas. Who also left sort of a legacy that has picked up by wonderful artists who have transformed and enhanced and enlarged and built worlds in it. It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of artists who are, entire whole things. And just, again, working in the spaces I work in both comedy and other spaces, it's a lot harder when you know, like, lots of people who were victims, and when you've personally known a few people who have been accused of being perpetrators. It's just like, I'm tired.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, and I don't think they're easy answers.
And also wrestling. Wrestling is another one where nothing I love is safe.
There's also that like added question that I sometimes worry, and I'll ask you all more off the show about this one, but there are works that I can sort of sit in my own relationship with and be like, I can live with these contradictions, but the question that I worry about a lot is like, when I bring it onto the show, when I share it with an audience, what am I endorsing? Am I putting money in someone's pocket? How much because there are obviously limits where like we're going to grandfather a lot of people in so we can talk about the history of comics.
Yeah.
Like there's going to be all this stuff, and like I love to add caveats to everything anyway, so it plays to my strengths to have to add all this stuff. But like negotiating where the right line is like an ongoing thing.
Well, I think that there's never anything wrong with nuance and understanding that things are not black and white. There is a lot of gray.
Yeah.
And understanding again, there once there's like a crap ton of accusers for someone who's like a person that now you could run into on the street, it's like a hoo-booey. It's different than something
from the distant past.
Than something from the distant past. Or something where it's like, well, I've heard a rumor, but no one's said specifics and no one's come forward and said it was me yet. So it makes everything in me pucker and feel weird, but I don't.
Mixed feelings. It's a whole life.
Yeah.
It's, again, it's subtlety and everything is allowed. And
I don't know what this is in reference to, but Miss Sunflower says, Danielle, you're an icon.
Aww.
She is correct.
Yes.
I want like a whole extra show to dig into.
I know.
This
I didn't
stuff.
want it to get so deep. I'm sorry.
No.
But,
Again,
yeah.
this is one of those ones where it's like, particularly because just being show busyness, having done stand up for so many years, all of these things, I know people on a bunch of like different sides of this.
Yeah.
So it's just like, there is nothing in this that is not like a sad, weird landmine for me.
But what is, and I do want to add that what's interesting is like it absolutely does and can feel exhausting to be dealing with this news. But the thing to remember is that if it comes to bad behavior in the world, someone was already exhausted because they were living through this.
Yep.
And now it's
Most
just
important.
that we're not pretending it's not happening anymore.
Yep.
So that's the thing. Like when you're sort of like, God, I just do not want to read another story like this. The thing that to remind yourself in that moment is like, this was already true.
Yeah.
The
We're
difference
living
is
with that story.
we are moving into a different mode of engagement where we
Absolutely.
care that happened to people.
Or at least people will pretend enough to care to let those people talk about it.
And that is part of, it has to be part of like, because Wednesday Club is a place where we celebrate a lot of things we love. But this is part of it. And I'm really glad that you guys brought this stuff up because it's nice to talk through, because this has to be part of our relationship to the works that we love, to art that we love. We're not going to settle the question of like art and artists, but like knowing that we are all negotiating that together, hopefully you all like can share in this catharsis we're having on the couch here.
Because there is no right answer, you know.
No.
Well, maybe there is. I don't know.
But we do.
I don't.
Speaking of right answers, I'm going to put you on the spot now because it is time for our 5-minute topic. We do this every week on the Wednesday Club. We do a 5-minute topic on something of chat's choice.
Okay.
You can watch it every Wednesday on twitch.tv/geekandsunday and Project Alpha. I am Amy Dallin, and today I have amazing special guests with me.
Danielle Radford, hello.
Xander Genre.
Daniel Radford and Xander, please answer for me this question in 5 minutes.
Do we do it together?
We have 5 minutes and we'll all go through.
Copy.
Geek Mama 3 asks, you are a washed up superhero. What is your name and what caused your forced retirement? You are a washed up superhero.
Okay.
What is your name and what caused your forced retirement?
Can I use my old Mary Sue?
Yes! Yes, please!
So my old Mary Sue, her name was Danielle Cherie. I won't tell you what my middle name was. So she was a mutant whose power was to have the power of all other mutants. She had
This is beautiful.
pink hair and diamond eyes,
Of course.
which were also pink. So she got washed up because after the extreme era of the 90s, there was just no more need for anyone with pink hair, a snatched waist, zero back, huge boobs, kind of a butt, and no feet. There was just no need for them. There were no need for them. And so she retired quietly to her home, where she was taken care of by her cats and by the corset that she had to wear, because that was the only way she could balance having such a snatched waist and all those boobs, but with zero back muscles or anything. And she lives the rest of her days as a cautionary tale, where she goes to libraries and speaks to young writers about the dangers of self-insertion.
This is a term for fan
What?
fiction. Look up Mary Sue. This is so funny. Oh my god. Oh my god.
I think I'm following now more.
A self-insert fanfic is where you basically are like, I'm
It's
on
you.
board the Enterprise and I'm everyone's favorite.
Right. Barclay.
It's a
You're Barclay.
classic trope of fanfiction writing.
Yes.
We have 3 minutes left.
Okay.
Oh man.
Here, I got mine. Ready?
Yeah, go.
Okay, his name is Blubber, and his superpower is much like my favorite superhero, Aquaman, except he's limited to underwater mammals only. So whales and things like that, and dolphins, but he's unable to breathe underwater. So it just creates a big issue. But in the 80s, when everyone's like, save the whales, he was in his heyday. Like he was out there on news saving whales, but one day he was literally washed up because he spent too long underwater talking to some whales and just got beached. And so now nobody cares. Nobody cares anymore. And Blubber lives out his days in a shack.
Now he's a sad cautionary tale about like our need for a revitalized environmental movement.
Yeah.
Bring back Blubber.
Bring back Blubber.
Blub Shack.
I feel like mine is, let's see. Oh, okay. Mine is going to be an honor to my dad was in computer science. My hero was extremely cutting edge and extremely relevant to the kids of today, and her name was Punch Card.
Ooh, wow.
And she was like a proto-oracle, except she would solve problems with her like room-sized computer. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So she just like, you know, she had like like when my mom was teaching math and had a calculator that you wheeled in on a cart. Like, she was just like real advanced, but ultimately she could not afford to keep up with the personal computing revolution.
Sure.
So she
Right.
just went into retirement. But like
man.
Punch Card, you know, she was
Yeah.
like, I'm Punch.
Bam.
The name didn't translate to new technologies.
Right.
And so
She tried going by
ultimately-
Scantron for a bit, but it
Yeah.
didn't.
Didn't work. And she's like, no, get it, because I'll punch your card. And everyone was like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the save icon. They don't know what that is. It's a floppy disk.
Yep.
Look it up. So yeah, Punch Card was forced into retirement, but I'm going to say also gets onto that like library speaking tour thing and does like some sort of docenting of like old school electronics, or like, you know, has a like a Dark Knight Returns late career comeback where like some kid is like, kids are learning to program now, and she's like, there's a place for my skills. So that's what happens to
Yay.
Punch Card in the end.
I like to think that she had a sidekick named Floppy Disk. Just like also became obsolete.
Seemed like a good idea at the time. And it was just
CD-ROM.
like, dear Mr. Floppy. And it's like, no, that's badly chosen. Sometimes you just got to live with those names.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
got real big.
Yep.
8 seconds to go. Thank you, Geek Mama, for that wonderful
That was
question.
fantastic.
Thank you, Geek Mama.
Oh, man. Yeah, this has been the 5-Minute Topic on the Wednesday Club. You can watch us every week on Project Alpha and Geek and Sundry. And please follow my fabulous guests. Yeah, and we have just a couple minutes. Is there anything you guys wanted to say about licensed comics? 2 minutes left.
Watch or read Power Rangers.
Yay!
If I can, it is still like sort of a small fandom. Like the Ranger fans are very, very loyal. Power Morphicon happens. It's a whole Power Ranger convention. But the comics are very good. So if
Do the Bards have any Power Ranger songs?
The Bards have a Power Ranger song coming up on the next album. So it's a parody of Time After Time, but it's Mighty Morphin Time, and it's like a punk rock sped up version of Time After Time.
So happy.
It's like me first in the Gimme Gimmes.
Yes, yeah.
okay.
I am so excited for it. It's if you're a Ranger fan, you'll love this song.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Oh my God, I'm so happy. More about licensed comics. Just don't count them out, because I feel like a lot of us remember back in the day when it was just like, the Predator meets with who, or were things that were like they were good, but
The Predator met everybody.
Predator met everybody, or it used to feel more like cheap cash-ins, except for a lot of the Star Wars stuff, which was really good.
Yeah.
But
We didn't even get into that.
Oh, no.
Pick up Jody Hauser's Poe Dameron annual.
Yes.
the Star Wars stuff has always been really, really, really fantastic. So give licensed comics a chance.
Yeah.
They are good, and many of them can not only expand the stories that you love, but they can also be transformative.
Yeah.
And I'd even talk about Star Trek comics too, and the mirror.
And there's so much good stuff. And Star Trek comics were some of the earliest ones before people had home video. They did the photo comics of Star Trek, and that was how a bunch of people encountered those stories for the. There's so much.
Remember when X-Men met Star Trek and McCoy became friends? Dr. McCoy went Dr. McCoy.
Okay.
Anyway,
thanks.
Where can people find you on the internet?
Yeah.
Danielle Radford on Twitter.
At Xanderific with 2 R's and 1 F. On Twitter.
Danielle has a Patreon that you need to check out. Xander has a new show on Alpha.
Yes.
They're fabulous people. Please give them a big Wednesdaysy greeting online. Thank you so much for watching.
Double dream hands.
And what's up next is Wee!
Wee!